Hello and welcome to this episode. And it's been a little bit longer than I wanted to pass by since I last recorded. I've just been having a few difficult days with my health, more my mental health. And even this morning has been a difficult morning. And I woke up feeling tired, feeling very exhausted, so perhaps I'm not getting a restful sleep at the moment. And I'm actually sat here in my pajamas and also a blanket that has sleeves. I think there's a name for it, Snuggie or something, or this is not that, but this is probably a replica of that design, but it seems to be a common thing now, blanket with sleeves. And I haven't had breakfast yet, so it's probably, ideally I should have I used the word should when often I talk about there is no shoulds, but perhaps I could say it may have been a good idea to have breakfast before, but I think with my mood I thought when the thought about recording came, I thought it's best to begin that, versus sometimes you have an urge to do something and you think, oh, I'll just do this one thing and then I'll do it, and then you do the one thing and then the urge is gone. And you think, sometimes when you realise later, oh yeah, I wanted to do that this morning. What happened? And it can be quite amusing. But for me, this feels quite important to do. Not only to, share some teachings from. At the moment, we're looking at Eckhart's book, The Power of Now. Not only to help anyone else who comes across this audio, but also it perhaps gives me some productivity, it also helps me the same way as it perhaps will help a listener, just to follow the pointings myself and be present. So there's a couple of things I want to just bring up before we jump into the power of now. And that's the first thing is the notion of polarity. I watched one of Eckhart's videos a couple of days ago, and it's from his younger days. It's a series of videos that I posted a link to them in a previous episode, maybe a few episodes ago. And he talks in there about polarity, at how everything that's form-based, there's a polarity to it. And so we could use some simple examples of perhaps achieving something, or even on emotions there's polarity, because, say for example, you're happy right now, eventually the polarity is going to come of unhappiness. You can use the simple example of being hungry. You'll have something and, okay, I feel full now, but eventually the polarity will come and you'll be hungry again. And we can look at pain. Or you can perhaps look at peacefulness. And peacefulness in regards to a surface level in the mind. That peacefulness where it's temporary, and then suddenly there's going to be noise, and the mind's going to react to that. Oh, I just got everything quiet. Why is there noise now? And there's going to be some disturbance that comes. And maybe you're in a state of bliss. And again, I refer to this as almost a surface level bliss, where it's dependent on conditions. Let's just say you've just got a brand new iPhone or iPad, whatever latest model is out, it's brand new and shiny, you've got it there. And you're excited and you're thinking, I can do lots of things with this. And there's lots of projections of the future of all the amazing things you can do. And yes. And perhaps if I do this, it will bring some significance. I can add something to myself. And then you turn the iPhone on or the iPad and it doesn't work. Suddenly. Or you use it and it's harder to use than you realised. It's a lot of work to do what you wanted to do with it, and suddenly there's a dissatisfaction and there's pain there. And it's I had all these plans and all these wonderful emotions about this, and now it's or you do what you want to do with it, and then the end product is there and it's all finished, and you feel, it's not as fulfilling as I thought it would be. I know I'm painting quite a bleak picture. It's not to say don't do anything like this, but don't let this be the root of your attention, because there's always a polarity to it. There's always another side to it. In the big picture, these are all labels. There is no good and bad, but in the mind, there's good and bad. In the mind, there's happiness and unhappiness. There's all these emotions that each have their polarities, and they're always changing, always shifting. So it's almost, the nature of it is change, but our mind wants to keep it still. It wants to hold on to it. It doesn't want to move. And I'm happy now. Okay, let's just stay in this happiness. Don't touch or move anything. You kind of try to hold on to it. And then when something happens, there's blame. Often it's blaming other people, or blaming an organisation, company. They're responsible for my unhappiness. Or somebody slams a door, wakes you up, a nice sleep. It's them. It's all their fault. There's blame. So it's good perhaps to just be aware of the nature of polarity and how, trying to find a serenity, a deep serenity or an unending joy from these temporary forms and these changing forms it's not going to be possible. Yes, you can enjoy these temporary forms, but you are not rooted by them. So if they change, okay, they've changed. So you had something pleasurable here, and now it's dissolved, it's gone now, okay. You were feeling peaceful in the mind, and you were observing it from a deeper place. You were observing the emotion of peacefulness, or bliss, of ecstasy come in. I feel quite good today. Then in the afternoon, maybe some sadness arises, but it's observed from that unchanging place. You're not invested in that sadness. You're not holding on to. So you're not invested in that happiness or bliss. You're not holding on to it. You're just simply observing it and allowing it to be. Okay, there's happiness here. Okay, you can enjoy that. And then when the sadness comes, you can see it for what it is. Oh, it's just some sadness. Maybe there's something in me that's arising that needs to be flushed out, or it could just be a light sadness. It may not have to be something complex. It can just be something sad, or even if it's a dark day, there's lots of clouds, and maybe a hint of sadness comes. Oh. But you're not investing yourself in it. You're not unpacking the sadness and thinking, and making a story out of it, an identity out of it, where you pick up the phone and think, it's a really dull day today, isn't it? And you're creating emotions about it. There's energy going into it, and we may not realise how much energy and how much perhaps negative or unhealthy emotions we're creating inside ourselves, even in a subtle level. When we complain about something, we may not be as sensitive to our bodies of, there's some resistance happening here. But we're so used to that resistance that we don't notice it anymore. In complaining, in making a story out of things, and on top of that, she did this or he did that. And it's a normal insanity that's happening, a normal feeling of resistance. It's only until you feel the deep peacefulness of non-resistance, and that can be quite rare, because maybe we're surrounded by people who are not aware of this dimension. They're just, they're there trying to keep things still in the environment that's always changing. And the other observation I wanted to cover, as well as looking at polarity and not rooting yourself in the form dimension, also the energy identity takes. I noticed this the other day. I was watching something on YouTube, and I was aware of, I was labelling what I was seeing. There's perspectives, there's judgments there. And I was aware of the energy it takes to hold up that kind of little me, that mental formations that we have that we call me. That's me. And it's always trying to decode stuff, to judge things, to box things, to label things. And, what does this mean? Okay, this means this. So I was almost aware of the mechanics of the identity. It's everything that's coming in from the senses to the identity. And it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy that's going into these things. And again, we may not realise how much energy it takes when we're so used to it. That's a nice person there, or I don't like the way they said this, and it's all stemming from this point of me. Perhaps we can just refer to that as the formations in our mind that we're holding up. That's me. And it's almost scanning all the things for our senses. I like this, I don't like that. And I like the way she said this, but I don't like the way she's dressed. Or, it's all these things it's taken up. But we're so used to this surge of energy, this energy of identity. It's almost carrying a weight around you all the time. But we're so used to the weight, we don't realise it is a weight. We just think it's us. That's just me. Well, that's just my mind. And that's why when you are in presence, there's an automatic lifting. There's a light feeling, relief. You can almost sense that if you're carrying some heavy shopping bags, and as soon as you put them down, there's that let that go. And I noticed that in the mind as well. And so perhaps, if you do catch yourself, and again, there's no wrong doing here, it's just perhaps experience, it's heavy having the identity and judging and labeling things all the time, but then there's a space, all of that dissolves. You're just simply observing without all of that energy, without the mind churning. And it's for you to experience and think, let's step into this dimension for a little while, and I can leave the mind that's always crunching numbers and data and everything coming through the senses is trying to put meaning to it. How exhausting, but how normal, I say normal in inverted quotes, of how that process is. So I think that came into my awareness because I was so tired. I was watching a video and I was, what's all this labeling? There was some space happening there. I was, God, the mind is just driving me crazy. It's, and almost when that dropped away, there was almost a deepening there. So when I was watching, the person talking in the video, and I wasn't judging about them, about how they looked or what they were wearing or how they were speaking. There was almost just, there's just seeing their aliveness. Something in them was almost powering them, like a really strong battery. So I was just sensing their aliveness, watching their movements of their body and watching their expressions, but there's no labeling involved. It's just observing. So I just wanted to mention that. And if you catch yourself doing it as well, don't. It's not a case of being hard on yourself. I'm doing it again. I've been trying for a few days not to do it, and then suddenly it's just all. For the last 3 hours, I've been in my mind, or I've been labeling these things, and it's just. Just be aware of the practice, but you don't have to force it. There's no willpower needed. Almost, it's like it's not an achievement. It's not a doing. It's an undoing. It's a non-doing. So you could also think of it as that. Okay. So before I talk any further, I thought maybe it'd be good to keep up with some momentum and continue reading from where we left off. And I find out with books, when some time has gone by, I find that the momentum is lost and it's harder to get back into it again. So perhaps with the help of these recordings, I can, perhaps make some more progress on the power of now, and also other books as well. I've got, several other books to read also. After this one, maybe it's a good idea not to jump straight into Eckhart's other book, The New Earth. Maybe it's good to have a book in between. I've got a book on Thich Nhat Hanh, and maybe that book or another book, and then maybe return back to the New Earth, and maybe it'd be good to have a little break between that. Okay, so this section is called Love-Hate Relationships. So that sounds like something we may be able to relate to. Okay. Unless and until you access the consciousness, frequency of presence, all relationships, and particularly intimate relationships, are deeply flawed and ultimately dysfunctional. They may seem perfect for a while, such as when you are in love, but invariably that apparent perfection gets disrupted as arguments, conflicts, dissatisfaction, and emotional or even physical violence occur with increasing frequency. It seems that most love relationships become love-hate relationships before long. Love can then turn into savage attack, feelings of hostility, or complete withdrawal of affection at the flick of a switch. This is considered normal. The relationship then oscillates for a while, a few months or a few years, between the polarities of love and hate, and it gives you as much pleasure as it gives you pain. It is not uncommon for couples to become addicted to those cycles. Their drama makes them feel alive. When a balance between the positive and negative polarities is lost, and the negative destructive cycles occur with increasing frequency and intensity, which tends to happen sooner or later, then it will not be long before the relationship finally collapses. It may appear that if you could only eliminate the negative or destructive cycles, then all would be well and the relationship would flower beautifully. But alas, this is not possible. The polarities are mutually interdependent. You cannot have one without the other. The positive already contains within itself the as yet unmanifested negative. Both are in fact different aspects of the same dysfunction. I am speaking here of what are commonly called romantic relationships, not of true love, which has no opposite because it arises from beyond the mind. Love as a continuous state is as yet very rare as conscious human beings. Brief and elusive glimpses of love, however, are possible whenever there is a gap in the stream of the mind. The negative side of a relationship is of course more easily recognizable as dysfunctional than the positive one, as it is also easier to recognize the source of negativity in your partner than to see it in yourself. It can manifest in many forms: possessiveness, jealousy, control, withdrawal, and unspoken resentment, the need to be right, insensitivity and self-absorption, emotional demands, and manipulation, the urge to argue, criticize, judge, blame, or attack, anger, unconscious revenge for past pain inflicted by a parent, and rage and physical violence. On the positive side, you are in love with your partner. This is at first a deeply satisfying state. You feel intensely alive. Your existence has suddenly become meaningful because someone needs you, wants you, and makes you feel special, and you do the same for him or her. When you are together, you feel whole. The feeling can become so intense that the rest of the world fades into insignificance. It's a tongue twister. However, you may also have noticed that there is a neediness and clinging quality to that intensity. You become addicted to the other person. He or she acts on you like a drug. You are on a high when the drug is available, but even the possibility or the thought that he or she might no longer be there for you can lead to jealousy, possessiveness, attempts at manipulation through emotional blackmail, blaming and accusing, fear of loss. If the other person does leave you, this can give rise to the most intense hostility or the most profound grief and despair. In an instant, loving tenderness can turn into a savage attack or dreadful grief. Where is the love now? Can love change into its opposite in an instant? Was it love in the first place, or just an addictive grasping and clinging? And there's a new section with a title, Addiction and the Search for Wholeness. So we'll just pause a moment while I grab a drink. And as for those new to this audio, I don't edit these podcasts, so feel free to have a sip of water or take a conscious breath. You may hear my neighbour upstairs there. I'm not sure if you can. The voice seems to be, even though they're upstairs, it seems to travel down the wall. It almost feels like they're right next door to me, but maybe you can hear it in the background. So, and I was thinking about recording a little bit later, but I thought it's good to record now, even though there's a little bit of background noise. You may pick up on the voice in the background, but that's okay. I thought it's, as I mentioned before, the urge was there, and I thought I'd grasp the opportunity to record. So in that last section, we saw the polarity of even love, and Eckhart's talking about love not in the pure sense of love, but in the romantic kind of box of love of, there's you and me and we complete each other in that sense, and you can almost sense that polarity again in that temporary emotion. And so with the new section, it starts with a question. Again, this section is called Addiction and the Search for Wholeness. And the question is, why should we become addicted to another person? And this is the response. The reason why the romantic love relationship is such an intense and universally sought after experience is that it seems to offer liberation from a deep-seated state of fear, need, lack, and incompleteness that is part of the human condition in its unredeemed and unenlightened state. There is a physical as well as a psychological dimension to this state. On the physical level, you are obviously not whole, nor will you ever be. You are either a man or a woman, which is to say, one half of the whole. On this level, the longing for wholeness, the return to oneness, manifests as male-female attraction, man's need for a woman, woman's need for a man. It is an almost irresistible urge for union with the opposite energy polarity. The root of this physical urge is a spiritual one, the longing for an end to duality, a return to the state of wholeness. sexual union is the closest you can get to this state on the physical level. This is why it is the most deeply satisfying experience the physical realm can offer. But sexual union is no more than a fleeting glimpse of wholeness, an instant of bliss. As long as it is unconsciously sought as a means of salvation, you are seeking the end of duality on the level of form, where it cannot be found. You are given a tantalizing glimpse of heaven, but you are not allowed to dwell there and find yourself again in a separate body. On the psychological level, the sense of lack and incompleteness is, if anything, even greater than on the physical level. As long as you are identified with the mind, you have an externally derived sense of self. That is to say, you get your sense of who you are from things that ultimately have nothing to do with who you are. Your social role, possessions, external appearance, successes and failures, belief systems, and so on. This false mind-made self, the ego, feels vulnerable, insecure, and is always seeking new things to identify with, to give it a feeling that it exists. But nothing is ever enough to give it lasting fulfillment. Its fear remains. Its sense of lack and neediness remains. But then that special relationship comes along. It seems to be the answer to all the ego's problems and to meet all its needs. At least this is how it appears at first. All the other things that you derived your sense of self from before now become relatively insignificant. You now have a single focal point that replaces them all, that gives meaning to your life, and through which you define your identity, the person you are in love with. You are no longer a disconnected fragment in an uncaring universe, or so it seems. Your world now has a centre, the loved one. The fact that the centre is outside you, and that, therefore, you still have an externally derived sense of self, does not seem to matter at first. What matters is that the underlying feelings of incompleteness, of fear, lack, and unfulfillment, so characteristic of the egoic state, are no longer there. Or are they? Have they dissolved, or do they continue to exist underneath the happy surface reality? If in your relationships you experience both love and the opposite of love, attack, emotional violence, and so on, then it is likely that you are confusing ego attachment and addictive clinging with love. You cannot love your partner one moment and attack him or her the next. True love has no opposite. If your love has an opposite, then it is not love, but a strong ego need for a more complete and deeper sense of self, a need that the other person temporarily meets. It is the ego's substitute for salvation, and for a short time it almost does feel like salvation. But there comes a point when your partner behaves in ways that fail to meet your needs, or rather those of your ego. The feelings of fear, pain, and lack that are intrinsic part of egoic consciousness, but had been covered up by the love relationship, now resurfaces. Just as with every other addiction, you are on a high when the drug is available, but invariably there comes a time when the drug no longer works for you, when those painful feelings reappear, you feel them even more strongly than before. And what is more, you now perceive your partner as the cause of those feelings. This means that you project them outward and attack the other with all the savage violence that is part of your pain. This attack may awaken the partner's own pain, and he or she may counter your attack. At this point, the ego is still unconsciously hoping that its attack or its attempts at manipulation will be sufficient punishment to induce your partner to change their behavior so that it can use them again as a cover-up for your pain. Every addiction arises from unconscious refusal to face and move through your own pain. Every addiction starts with pain and ends with pain. Whatever the substance you are addicted to, alcohol, food, legal or illegal drugs, or a person, you are using something or somebody to cover up your pain. That is why, after the initial euphoria has passed, there is so much unhappiness, so much pain in intimate relationships. They do not cause pain and unhappiness, they bring out the pain and unhappiness that is already in you. Every addiction does that. Every addiction reaches a point where it does not work for you anymore, and then you feel the pain more intensely than ever. This is one reason why most people are always trying to escape from the present moment and are seeking some kind of salvation in the future. The first thing they might encounter if they focus their attention on the now is their own pain. And this is what they fear. If they only knew how easy it is to access in the now the power of presence that dissolves the pain, dissolves the past and its pain, the reality that dissolves the illusion. If they only knew how close they are to their own reality, how close to God. Avoidance of relationships in an attempt to avoid pain is not the answer either. The pain is there anyway. 3 failed relationships in as many years are more likely to force you into awakening than 3 years on a desert island or shut away in your room. But if you could bring intense presence into your aloneness, that would work for you too. So that's the end of that section, and there's a symbol here that I've talked about before. It's almost like a S, a stretched S with a dot in each curve. It reminds me of like a music symbol, and I think Eckhart put that in there as a place to reflect on what's been read. So it's this again. This book's not designed to be read in one fell swoop. It's designed to digest it as you go along. And also, just apologies for, I'm a bit aware of my reading style. It may not flow in a sense of where sentences end. I can almost sense that I'm not reading with the flow of how the words are being written. So that's just how it is at the moment. But I'm certainly aware of that. So I hope that doesn't make things too unclear when I read from here. Sometimes, as my voice, there's almost a way of reading, isn't there? When a sentence ends, your voice the tone of it signifies the end of the sentence. And, when you're reading a long sentence, you're kind of almost pacing the voice and leaving gaps and changing your tone to kind of convey that sentence. And I feel like sometimes I lack in that area, so apologies for that. And so there may be some very intense feelings coming up from what we've just read, because he's almost turned what we think is love on its head. It's turned it, and if you're in a relationship right now, you may be thinking, "Oh, that's what I'm doing. Am I truly in love with this person, or is this true love?" But so some very intense, very important as well. It continues what I talked about before about polarity, and it's I'm glad I mentioned it before. I didn't realise Eckhart. I haven't read this book before, so I didn't realise he was going to talk about love and the polarity of even the emotion of what we think is love. But you can almost see the instability of that romantic love, where it's all done unconsciously. Like, we see that person, oh yes, now I'm whole. You talked about their physical wholeness of, you mentioned a sexual union, and then the psychological side as well, they complete me, and there's an ecstasy to that, but it's almost covering up the lacking. You almost have to keep running on that love treadmill to keep up that romanticness going. But when you stop, or when it's no longer able to keep up that romantic feeling, then something arises, and there's the polarity of that. And sometimes then maybe there's arguments, or there's a dissatisfaction, or what's changed? Have I changed, or have they changed? We start trying to look for things, for what's, but as Eckhart mentioned, it's impossible to find that wholeness in form. And especially when it's done unconsciously as well. So he's not saying, we can't have a romantic relationship, or we can't enjoy that side of things, but if you're trying to look for wholeness just in that, then you're dealing in a world of polarity, a world of change. You're trying to find the permanency in something that's impermanent, that's always shifting. And it really changes the whole the whole approach to a relationship. Even as I was reading, there's thoughts coming on, you mentioned about, how we see ourselves in terms of our successes and our appearance, and it almost made me realise that all of those things don't matter, because in that it matters in form, in the mind. It matters tremendously. It's the most important thing, of how we look, our image. Do I look? There's nothing wrong with fashion, but if you're plugged into fashion unconsciously, you're trying to keep up that image of, oh yes, this is how I'm looking. I want my clothes to you're almost trying to give other people labels when they see your clothes, that you're a cool person, or you're sophisticated, this and that, and you're keeping up with the trends to maintain this projection. You're beaming out to other people. It's all temporary. So it's almost just rubbed all the marker pen, if there's a big whiteboard in front of you of all the concepts of a relationship, of how you have to be and dress, and how you have to act with somebody to kind of attract them, and it's almost just literally just dissolving all of that away. And you're actually interacting with that person on a much deeper level. Of course, we're in this physical form, so you're obviously going to take that into consideration when you see somebody. If you're looking at somebody, you'll be aware if there's a physical attraction there, but it won't be where you're rooted from as well. You'll be rooted in that person's aliveness. Especially if you're in that place, if you're in this path of awakening, you want to see yourself in them, see the stillness you're cultivating in yourself in that person. That's going to be the main root of the relationship, that oneness there. And then things like physical attraction and how you complement each other emotionally, yes, that is to be considered, but it's not the root of it anymore. It's almost a periphery. And that's, again, that periphery stuff is always going to be changing. But like Eckhart said, that if you're holding the root of yourself in there, then you're going to have the polarity of that stuff. Yeah, it feels like there's lots I want to talk about, but it's hard to convey in words. But that has made me, I've listened to a video or read something about this before, about this oneness in a relationship where you're connected to their essence versus to their mind formations, or the temporary forms they are. And so if you're single and you're in a place of wanting a relationship, then perhaps this will give you something to reflect upon. Okay, I can feel myself dropping off energy-wise. It's probably because I haven't eaten anything. It's lunchtime now, so I should do that. And I'm using the word should again. I'm catching myself, so that's good as well. But it'd be a good idea for me to eat, and also I've got the exciting job of getting groceries. So, and for those of you listening in the future, right now this is being recorded when COVID or coronavirus is happening, and so it's a challenge for me to get groceries with my anxiety and the energy it takes to get outside as well. But again, this will be perhaps part of my spiritual practice. Okay, so I think I'll end this now, because it feels like I'm just going to ramble and not be too aware of what I'm talking about. So, okay, so thank you for joining me for this episode. I've enjoyed recording this, and feels like I've gotten a lot out of this recording. So I'll again set the attention to record again soon, and I'll leave that to the universe to unfold as it does. But I wish you well in this moment as always, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.